Hello and welcome. Today we're going to learn how to play Defenders of Hogwarts. In this asymmetric deck building game for 2 to 5 players, a thrilling battle of wits unfolds to determine the fate of Hogwarts. Let's take a closer look. Setup. Main board. To set up the game, place the main board, sideboard and player boards on the table. Add the defense shields and Hogwarts tokens to their spaces around the castle and grounds. House players get 4 pawns each. 3 start in the Great Hall and 1 starts on the Hogwarts loyalty track on the sideboard. The Dark Arts player starts with 4 to 7 pawns depending on the number of players. For this video, we'll set up a game with the max number of players, so the Dark Arts player will start with all 7 pawns. Place 4 of the pawns onto the Dark Arts deployment spaces around the grounds. The rest will become part of the Dark Arts player setup. Sideboard. The sideboard is where players can track their progress on the Hogwarts loyalty track and the Dark Arts path. It also holds location cards, the House Player Acquire deck, and other items players will be trying to get to win the game. Both the House players and the Dark Arts player have a starter deck and an Acquire deck. Starter cards have a banner in the top right corner so you can tell them apart. Put these aside, you'll need them in a minute. And be sure to shuffle all cards before putting them into play. Now place the House Player Acquire deck in the middle. Then deal 2 cards face up on the Advanced Acquire row and 2 more on the Acquire row. The Dark Arts Acquire deck can be part of their player board setup. Place the Library Book deck at the top and reveal 2 cards beside it. Then place both location decks face down at the top of the board. Player setup. Each player receives a player board and their starter deck of 7 cards, which go in the draw space. You can also hand out the player aid cards if needed. These are a quick guide for how to play a turn and a reminder of key symbols. To finish setting up the Dark Arts player board, separate the events cards into 3 decks by colour and place them next to the board. Also, keep the Acquire deck nearby. To finish setting up the House player boards, place the House marker on their items space and draw 3 location cards from the sideboard. These can be kept to the side for now. Finally, all players shuffle and draw 5 cards from their starter deck into their hand, leaving the remaining cards face down in the draw space. Now, the game is ready to begin. Game overview. In Defenders of Hogwarts, players will take on the roles of Hogwarts students or a dark wizard. The game is set during an epic battle of good versus evil, which will change Hogwarts and the course of the wizarding world forever. The castle has been infiltrated by Death Eaters and dark forces, and it is only a matter of time before Lord Voldemort arrives. 2 to 5 players can play the game, but 1 player must always play the role of the Dark Arts player. House player goals. If you choose to play as a student loyal to Hogwarts, or a house player, your goal is to defend the school against the Dark Lord's imminent threat by acquiring 2 defense shields needed to protect the castle. You'll represent one of the 4 Hogwarts houses, all playing competitively to try and become the winning house that saves Hogwarts. To obtain a defense shield, you must gather all 3 items shown and then navigate to the shield space on the board to exchange them. There are 2 types of shields, and the items needed for each are 1 library book card, 1 parchment scroll, and 1 dark detector or 1 Dumbledore's army coin. It is your job to navigate the castle to collect these items and ultimately secure 2 of the shields, all while fending off the dark forces. As the game progresses, you can build your player deck to obtain more magical skills and strengthen your defences against the Dark Arts player. Dark Arts player goals. If you decide to represent the dark forces as a Dark Arts player, you will follow a dark path in an effort to undermine the house players who are working to protect the castle. Your goal is to defeat the house players before any one of them secures 2 defense shields. To do this, you must first progress along the Dark Arts path, recruiting dark forces and their tokens, represented as a giant, acromantula, and dementor. Only once you've secured all 3 tokens can you win the game by moving your pawn or pawns to one of the areas on your Dark Arts player location card. 1, 2, or 3 Dark Arts pawns are needed in that location depending on how far you have reached on the Dark Arts path. The farther along you are, the fewer required pawns and the easier it is to win. House player turn. Starting with the house player to the left of the Dark Arts player and going clockwise, players can complete one action each turn. House players choose from one of three possible main actions: explore, learn, or replenish. Explore. Explore the castle by playing a card from your hand, which has a movement value and an effect. Some of the cards have one number, meaning you can move one pawn up to that number of spaces. Some have two or more numbers, meaning you have more options. You can choose to combine values and move one pawn the total number of spaces, or you can move multiple pawns each number separately. Obstacles lay around the castle grounds which can only be passed through by playing a card with the matching icon. For example, the Alohomora card will allow you to move through a locked door, and the Gillyweed card will help you move through water. Beware, dark arts pawns can move freely through any of these obstacles. So you'll want to keep an eye out for the 4 protective areas around the board. The dark arts pawns cannot pass through or end on these spaces. With the correct card, players can also navigate obstacles and move between 2 non-adjacent spaces by using fly-off points and secret passageways. While the secret passageways are only accessible to house players, all players can use the fly-off points. As house players move around the board, they may stun a dark arts player by landing on the same space. Then, both players are stunned. The house player is stunned in their space and they get to move a dark arts pawn to an adjacent space of the house player's choice. When a pawn is stunned, it is placed down and cannot move or reverse the stun until taking a replenish action. Players can also be stunned by a card effect. After you have played and actioned one card, your turn is over and you must discard the card, unless you have a card allowing you to play a second card, or if your pawn finishes on a bonus space. Then you are granted an extra action, either card acquire, card draw from the player deck, or play again. Learn. The house player may also choose to use their turn to add a new magical skill to their arsenal. There are 3 options to complete a learn action. Discard one card and take one of the face-up cards from the acquire row, discard one card and take the top card of the acquire deck, or they can discard 2 cards, take one of the face-up cards from the advanced acquire row, and move up 1 space on the Hogwarts loyalty track. With any of these actions, the new card is placed on the top of the player's draw deck, face down for later. Be sure to immediately restock cards along the acquire row and advanced acquire row. Replenish. A house player's 3rd and final option for how to use their turn is to replenish their hand, but this comes at a cost. The dark arts player advances further along the dark arts path towards victory. To replenish, a house player can pick up from the draw pile until they have 5 cards total in their hand. They can do this when they have no cards left in their hand, or if they would like to discard any number of cards currently in their hand and replace them from the draw pile. They are then allowed to stand up any of their pawns that are currently stunned. And finally, they must move the dark arts marker up 1 space on the dark arts path. Free actions. In addition to the main actions of explore, learn, replenish, the house players may complete as many free actions as they like during their turn by using either a Hogwarts token or gaining a parchment scroll. There are 7 Hogwarts tokens around the grounds and castle, from the Charms classroom to the Herbology greenhouses. Players collect these by ending on that space, but can only hold 1 at a time and can't use it in the same turn that it was acquired. Each token matches one of the 7 card types. When played with the correct card, the house player can return a token to play a card with the matching type, as a free explore action during their turn, either before or after their main action. They may also reveal their location cards to gain a parchment scroll as an additional free action in their turn. But more on this later. Hogwarts loyalty track. Now let's learn more about the items you'll be going after during any turn, in hopes of picking up a defense shield. Just a reminder, 1 defense shield requires 3 items each, and you need 2 shields to win the game. First, let's take a look at the Hogwarts loyalty track. This track is key to a house player win because it provides the only route to 2 defense shield items, the Dark Detector and the Dumbledore's army coins. Players must progress along this track in an effort to obtain or unlock these items, and there are a few different ways to advance. By playing a relevant card with a relevant effect during an explore action, by taking a card from the advanced acquire row, either during a learn action or via a bonus space, or by landing on a Dark Detector space on the main board. Acquiring the Dark Detector. To get the Dark Detector, you must be the first to progress past the 4th space on the track. the Dark Detector can change hands throughout gameplay. When another player progresses along the track and passes the furthest player, they take the Dark Detector from them. When a player reaches the final space, if there is already another player on there, that player must drop back one space and draw a card in addition to losing the Dark Detector. The Dark Detector is released when a house player successfully uses it to obtain a defense shield. At that time, the player must drop back 3 spaces on the track and give the Detector token to the player that is now furthest along and at least on the 5th space. Otherwise, return it to its place on the track. Progressing along the Hogwarts loyalty track is the only way to get a Dark Detector. Acquiring Dumbledore's Army Coins. To acquire a Dumbledore's Army Coin, first, the Room of Requirement must be opened and added to the board. The first time any house player reaches or passes the 5th space on the track, the Room of Requirement piece is placed on the board. This indicates that it is now open and the supply of coins is added to the room. At this time, house players can enter the Room of Requirement during their turn to gain 1 coin from the supply. Entering the Room of Requirement is the only way to obtain a coin. There are 4 coins in total, but players can only have 1 coin in their possession at a time. To keep the room on the board, one house player needs to be at least on the 5th space on the track. If at any point all players are below this mark, the room must be removed. Beware! Any pawn in the Room of Requirement when it is removed from the board will be locked in the room until it is accessed again and added back to the main board. Acquiring a parchment scroll. Symbolising the knowledge required to defeat the dark forces, a parchment scroll is also required to collect a defence shield. Each house player begins the game with 3 location cards, which each show 1 classroom or location around the castle. The house player can obtain a scroll when they have navigated 2 of their pawns to 2 of the areas from the location cards in their hand simultaneously. Once a player has 2 pawns simultaneously in 2 of the 3 locations in their hand, they can immediately reveal the 2 location cards and discard them to collect a parchment scroll. Players can only get a maximum of 2 scrolls throughout the game, so if this is their first scroll, they must draw 2 new location cards for the ability to get another scroll. But after getting their second scroll, they discard any remaining location cards so they can't acquire any additional scrolls. Acquiring a library book card. A library book card is the final item a house player needs to collect a defense shield, and the only way to get it is with a visit to, you guessed it, the library. When a house player lands in the library, they can take one of the 2 book cards face up on the sideboard and replenish the space with a new card. A house player can only possess 1 book card at a time. Each card contains an effect or action, which must be taken immediately, as well as any knock-on effects or actions before placing it for safekeeping on your player board. And those are the items you're trying to collect during a house player turn. Dark Arts player turn. As the Dark Arts player, you may choose from 2 actions during your turn: explore or replenish. Remember, your goal is to stop the house players while trying to advance along the Dark Arts path. Explore. The Dark Arts player explore action is just like the house players with a few key differences. They also play a card from their hand, moving their pawn according to the card's value and effect. During their turn, the Dark Arts player can also choose to add extra pawns to the board using a movement value from their card. The new pawn starts on an available deployment space around the board. Unlike the house player, some of the Dark Arts card effects must be unlocked to be used. New effects are unlocked as the Dark Arts player progresses down the Dark Arts path. Each card has a different coloured effect, meaning the player must be in or past that zone on the path to use the effect during your turn. More on this later. And remember, the Dark Arts pawn can pass freely through obstacles, but they can never enter a protected area space. While exploring the castle, the Dark Arts players have the ability to bump house players by landing on the same space as one of their pawns. When a house player is bumped, they are sent back to the starting position in the Great Hall and need to hand over their house marker to the Dark Arts player. By bumping the house player, the Dark Arts pawn is also bumped back off the board. Once the Dark Arts player has all the house players' markers, they advance the Dark Arts marker on the Dark Arts path 1 space and return the markers to their players. However, the Dark Arts player is able to draw the top 2 cards from the Dark Arts acquired deck, choosing one to add to their draw deck and discarding the other to the bottom of the acquired deck. Replenish. The other option for the Dark Arts player's turn is to replenish their hand. To do this, they must stand up all of their stunned pawns, reversing their stun status. And then they draw until they have 5 cards in hand. One thing to note is that only the house players can discard while replenishing. The Dark Arts player can draw with cards in their hand, but not discard when they replenish. The Dark Arts Path. Now let's take a look at the Dark Arts Path, which the Dark Arts player must advance to win the game. They may move this token down this path after each time a house player replenishes their hand, there is an instruction from an event card, or the Dark Arts player gains all markers. There are 3 coloured zones along this path, showing the Dark Arts player's growing abilities and strength. It also holds the 3 progress tokens, which must be collected before the Dark Arts player can win the game. Each zone unlocks even more effects in the Dark Arts player's acquire deck and contains event spaces which have the power to impact the entire board. Event cards. When the Dark Arts player lands on an event space, they must draw an event card of the same colour. Event cards have 2 parts, one event for the house players and one event for the Dark Arts player. While a few of the white event cards contain positive house player events, most will negatively impact them. As soon as an event card is drawn, all house players must complete the event on the card if possible. On the other hand, the Dark Arts player has a choice. They can complete their part of the event and reap the benefit, or collect that zone's progress token and get one step closer to winning the game. The Dark Arts player must take the progress token from a zone before advancing into the next coloured zone. When the marker leaves one zone, its event cards are not used for the rest of the game. As the Dark Arts player progresses down the path, the events become more punishing for the house players and the end of the game draws closer. Beware! Once the marker enters the red zone, the Dark Arts player can collect a location card for the first time, and the end game is near. End game. The first house player to gain 2 shields wins the game. To collect a defense shield, a house player must be in possession of the 3 items depicted on the shield and then land in the correct shield space. Once you collect a shield, you relinquish all the required items. There is no way to lose a shield once it's yours. This must be repeated to gain the 2 necessary shields to win the game. The Dark Arts player only has the ability to end the game once it has reached the red zone of the Dark Arts path. When their marker reaches the first red zone event space, the Dark Arts player takes an event card and they can choose to perform the event or take the last Dark Arts progress token. If they take the token, they will also draw a Dark Arts player location card from the sideboard. To win the game at this point, they must be in possession of all 3 progress tokens and get 3 Dark Arts player pawns to the spot on their location card. As the Dark Arts marker moves into the red zone, the player will need to move fewer pawns to their location, making it easier to win. If they haven't taken the token and location card by the second event space, the player can again choose to perform the event or take the last Dark Arts progress token. When the Dark Arts player reaches the second event space and they choose to collect the token and location card, they only need to move 2 pawns to win. When the Dark Arts player lands on the last event space, they must take the token and the location card if they haven't already. Now, all players draw up to 5 cards and cannot replenish again, raising the stakes even higher. At this point, gameplay continues with just those cards in hand until a house player wins by gaining 2 defense shields, the Dark Arts player wins by moving 1 pawn to the Dark Arts player location, or the game ends in a tie because all players run out of cards before a player has won. And that's how you play Defenders of Hogwarts. If you have any more questions, check out our rulebook for more details. You're now ready to join the battle. The only question is, which side will you choose?